Here at L4 Media, we talk high school football, 4A, 3A, and 2A in Texas. We talk East Texas sports. We talk NFL, guy talk, movie, and booze. We also talk wrestling and so much more. So like and subscribe and check us out.
Hi, I'm Josh Bell with the Miami Marlins. I wear NeuroGuard to help with strength and coordination when I'm in the weight room and help with balance when I'm on the baseball.
Hey, before this episode begins, I want to first off say I apologize for the delays. We were trying to do a new editing method for some of these off-season shows, and in the process of doing it, something happened with the Adobe Premiere Pro that I use for editing videos, and it basically corrupted a bunch of files. And so I've had to go back and rebuild this episode. And so far, I've only been able to rebuild the audio side, and there could be some weird edit points. Just know nothing was left out that was major or we were trying to change anything. It's just the way the editing went when I was rebuilding the files. So for this episode is basically going to be audio only. So you're just going to see our logo and our Patreon and stuff up here on the YouTube video as it's playing. So don't expect to see us or anything else. Also, Grant sounds a little different because he's actually not in studio for this episode. And we're in the process of getting him a mic over at his place so that he can do some of these shows just from his place and doesn't have to always drive to the studio each and every week. It's fun to do these shows, but I don't think a lot of people realize that, you know, he comes to the studio basically about 19 weeks in a row to do these shows, and where he works to where he lives to where the studio is, it's a pretty big far drive for him. So we're trying to make it easier for him. But anyway, this is the first episode of the 2025 offseason for Sideline to Sideline. We talk coaching changes. Of course, coming up here in a couple weeks, we'll start our other offseason series, the toughest regions, the toughest districts, and the dark horses. So be on the lookout for those. And again, just look on the screen and you can see where to find Sideline to Sideline as we begin our 18th year. And we really, really do appreciate everybody that has been tuning in over the years. And take it away, boys. The offseason has started for us. Hello, everybody. Terry Bennett, Grant Goodwin, Sideline to Sideline, year 18. We started in 2007. Yeah. Year 18 of our show. And no matter how long we've been doing this, the very first show we do each year, we always come off like we've never even met or talked before. It's so awkward at times, but that's also, we've spent an off season doing some things that we don't like to talk about too much.
No, we keep those under wraps.
How are you doing, buddy?
Good. Can you go to the Patreon though and hear what you've been doing? Maybe.
That's my only fan. I'm not allowed to talk about that right now.
Okay.
We are going to be talking about our Patreon stuff here in a little bit. We've got some great high school stuff we'll be doing for that. Also, if you've been listening to us before, welcome back. If this is your first time, how y'all doing? I'm Terry. That's Grant. This is Sideline to Sideline. We cover 4A, 3A, and 2A football in the state of Texas. And this is our usual just kind of, we needed to do these more back when people didn't know what sites to go to and they only found us through message boards. And so we would always have to kind of do a May show, just like, hey, here we are. That's kind of what we're doing now, but we will be ramping up our off-season stuff. We start those in July. We do the dark horses. We do the region favorites. We do the toughest districts. Sometimes we throw in an extra show in there. And then, of course, all that leading up to what will be our big Arse preview show, which we will record late July and let it run all the way through August. And we have been discussing, as you can tell, he's not in studio. We're going to do some more of the off-season shows and maybe a couple of in-season shows like this just to kind of help the burden of travel for Mr. Goodwin. But also, I know some of our off-season stuff we're going to do live. We might do some in-season stuff live too, like we've been doing over on Outdrink the Coverage.
Yeah, that'd be fun.
I kind of would like to maybe bring back, not every week, but the occasional Thursday night. We're just all hanging out watching, the scores come in on Thursday and get some coaches on and all. Speaking of Coach X, he will be joining us, though he did not write in this time, but he will be there, be with us. I think we figured out his 12th season of doing Coach X for us. But what we're going to be doing today is just basically kind of, well, first off, I want to ask you this. What are your thoughts on the fact that this weekend right now, not only is the baseball and all that, softball championships, baseball next week, softball this week, it's the girls flag football state championship games this weekend. I legitimately think girls flag football will become a huge thing here in Texas. It'll never it'll never reach actual football, but I think it could surpass some of the other secondary sports.
Yeah, I do too. What is this? The second year? Is that right?
But yeah, I think this is the second year that the UIL sanctioned it. I think it's awesome.
Yeah, I do too. I really do. Where are the state champions?
The flag state championship, I think, is in Austin.
Okay.
I'm trying to see who it is, though. I thought it had this listed. Hang on. I'm curious now just because we were talking about it. And baseball, of course, the state semifinals. This is the first year that they're doing the weird, not having a true tournament down there. It's kind of, I don't know. I'm not a big fan of that. I'm not a big fan of what they did with basketball. And I'm also not a big fan of coaching changes. And other than what it pertains to on the field. And you and I get asked every offseason, why don't y'all do a coach's, leaving thing? And it's just like, nobody does it better than Matt Stepp, so why try to do what he does?
Right.
I know part of the job is somebody's getting a job, but part of it is somebody's losing a job. And even if you're just talking about it in a perfunctory way, it still kind of comes off when you do it too early, like you're just stepping over a dead man's grave, in my opinion.
Right. Yeah.
And
I
so,
like the way we kind of been doing it, just summarizing it, I guess.
Summarizing it, hey, this is interesting. And we will make notes of some of the, that was a school board hire or fire, but some of the other ones, and we all know rumors, we're not talking about that. We're talking about on the field. We'll let Coach X make those jokes because I have a funny feeling that this coming year, Coach X is going to be in rare form against one certain program. I'm just saying it right now. But
why don't we lead off with that program?
Let's go ahead and do it. As I think outside of maybe Liberty Hill's head coach dropping down, and not only dropping down, but and this is no defense.
Well, let's start with that because he went to Blanco, right?
Yeah, he goes to Blanco. Very interesting. I think there's two ways to look at it. I know some people will make jokes about it, but he saw the writing on the wall.
Yeah.
Look, Liberty Hill is about to open a new high school. Liberty Hill, and it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be bad, folks, but just like every other one town, once that breaks, it's gone. And Liberty Hill can still win a lot of state championships, but you're not going to have that same Panther community slot team mafia. And I think Kent Walker saw the writing on the wall. I think he goes to a school in Blanco that is desperate to finally push through that next level.
Yeah, and they've kind of been on the way up the last 5 years, right?
Yes, they have. Yeah. Jamie, and none of this happens if Jamie Dixon doesn't leave.
Right. He goes to is it Goliath? No, Edna. Right?
Edna. Yeah, he went to Edna because Jimmy Mitchell. Again, this is the part you and I like talking about, how these all puzzle pieces together and ends up all being, one big story. But I mean, Blanco was already becoming a 3A Division II. And also, from what I understand, they feel that they're going to be in 3A Division I pretty soon. And they're setting their eyes on a 4A eventually. Yeah. I think this is a brilliant hire for them.
Oh yeah. I think there's no better coach than Coach Walker to take over that program that's on the up, right? Definite upside the last few years. That SWAT T that he'll bring in, those are really tough kids in Blanco. A lot of times they'll have pretty decent size, but not the biggest guys up front. So I think this works perfect for the type of athletes that Blanco puts out there every year.
No, I agree. I think the slot, I'm not saying the slot T can't work anywhere, but I think the slot T seems to work really good in that region for some reason.
Oh, yeah.
And part of it is, and yes, every offense and every defensive scheme, no matter what the schematics are, you have to buy in. But there are certain offenses that you have to buy in, right. And the slot T is one of them. I still love slot T terms. Some call it the over tackle, the extra tackle. You can't whiff on a block and the play still be okay, like in some other offenses.
Right. Yeah.
And the slot T, from a gap out, every gap has to be won. Every gap has to be won consistently and at a pace. And so you have to buy in. And if he gets them to buy in quick enough, this is a team that you and I already probably were going to have pretty highly rated. I think this team that can become a region threat now.
Yeah, I look forward to getting down to Blanco over the next couple of years to see how this thing plays out.
So now we will go over to what we were talking about, though it stays in 3A Division II. But again, Gunter, Jake Gazelle, who, basically didn't start the program, but created the program that it became. 224 wins, 31 losses, 5 state titles, including 3 straight from 2002 to 2024. And remember, one year they got just unlucky with who their matchup was in state. Was one of the times that they lost. They easily could have had 6 state championships.
Yeah.
He leaves. All the hubbub, we don't care. I think they did the best thing they could, though. You know, you either go outside and you swing for a huge home run type of a name, or you just get the guy that's been the offensive coordinator in Jordan Gill. That's basically, and this is nothing against Gunter's defense. They're fast, they're active, but again, just like the slot T, their offense is what makes everything go for that program. And I think this is as good of a hire you could have done with him.
Yeah, a program like Gunter, like Coach Fazell had built there, why not stay within that system? And like you said, you know, swinging for the fences for a big hire, it was a little late in the year.
Exactly.
To be doing that anyway, right?
Yeah.
So I think this was the perfect move for Gunter.
And I think Gunter takes a different type of coach, because you're not going to get a ton of 3 stars, 4 stars. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
we even talk about players as great as Ethan Sloan is, and he's playing Division III football. Junior year, I think, doing really well. And I think that's the highest I can remember anybody from Gunter going that I've followed. You know, they don't end up playing. Like, Brock has tight ends that are in the professional game, and, you know, offensive linemen that are in Minnesota and Texas and all that.
Yeah.
Gunter has to win with that kind of what Salina used to be. And so I think you have to know that program.
Yeah.
And the only other way I thought they might go, I legitimately thought that they might look somewhere like a Brock and do that. But from what I've heard, it was always Jordan Gill, you know, this was the natural step. So
the understudy, right?
Yeah, kind of the understudy. He is, you know, he's been an office coordinator now for, I think, 10 years. But anyway, hey, staying in 3A Division II, this one's just because we've kind of been around them a lot lately, and that's Rogers.
Yeah.
And Rogers, Charlie Roten steps down. He had a very good 8 seasons, but they had kind of gotten, you know.
Couldn't get over that plateau in the region, right?
Yeah, the region semifinals just kept killing them.
Yeah.
That
was a tough area that they're located in, though. Yeah. You know, I mean, when you get about 2 to 3 rounds deep, down in that part of the region, you're usually going to face somebody pretty salty.
No, I totally agree with that. And then they hire Casey.
Kind of like the whole Forney thing used to be, right?
Dude, the stories you and I always talk about that, because you and I were
some of the best teams in the state, but my gosh, they would swing, you know, to Commerce, and it was a murderer's row. And I kind of think that's how that region is, or that part of that region especially.
Yeah, exactly. And Casey Carr, Round Rock defense coordinator, he's hired and he'll be stepping in. One of the other, I think, made a lot of noise, hire or letting goes, reassignments, whatever you want to use, corporate words. But Vanderbilt Industrial, Craig Nairn had done great things there. He'd been there 3 years. They had one of the toughest, if not the toughest, 3A Division II, maybe 3A, and maybe even you could say 4A. That's how tough this schedule was. And they were getting beat, but it wasn't like they were getting the doors blown off of them.
Right.
Obviously, this was one of those, somebody was just waiting for him to have a misstep so they could make this move.
Yeah, but boy, those previous, 3 years, man, he had the Cobras playing really well.
I mean, Vanderbilt Industrial, and this is where you and I have had so much fun doing this in the 20 years that we've been doing this, and in the more years that we've watched. Vanderbilt Industrial has went from being a laughingstock to being a consistent team, to where even their bad teams are still 6-4 and a really tough team to beat.
Yeah, you're right.
Let me go. I think that's all on 3A Division II that I really wanted to talk about. Let me flip back up. Oh, George West, simply because I was a little shocked by this. We talked about Walker going downward. Rod Blunt left Navarro and goes to George West. Technically, step down. But I also think he understands in that region, Navarro is now perpetually an 8-4 team. Nothing wrong with that, but you're just it's funny to say this. I never thought we'd say this in an era. It's the coastal football teams, the Cal Allens, the Sentons, and all them, and then you throw in, some other teams that pop occasionally. Those are the teams that are Navarro's just not going to get past.
Right. Yeah. And, I think this will be a natural progression for George West. Like you said, they're kind of stuck in that 8-win season, right? One by district area around at most. So I think a guy like Rod Blunt could come in and put his signature on this George West program.
Yeah, exactly. And
he had Navarro playing tough, man. They're really good teams. Were just physical.
Oh yeah, that's the thing, man. You knew no matter how you won or lost, your guys the next 2 days are going to need more ice baths because and sadly, George West coach Brent Bennett, no relation. And I've seen this more and more this year. He left to take a job outside of education.
Yeah, you see that more and more the last few years.
Johnny Levere leaving his hometown of Gladewater, his dream job for a job outside of football. Of course, right. I think there was the seat was hot, but I still think the extra money helped. Hey, Elysian Fields, they made a move as Justin Crowe resigned, and you know what? That dude took unceremoniously, not making as much noise as like when Pilot Point and all that happened, but he took an Elysian Field Gel Jack team that completely had fallen to just out of everything. They had been consistent for about 10 years.
Yeah.
And when they went bad, they went south really quick. And I thought Justin Crowe did a solid job getting them at least to be competitive again and kind of rebuilding the foundation of that program.
Yeah. The way they kind of fell off though, and the tradition and the history that Elysian Fields has, I feel like Elysian Fields, all they're lacking is just some consistency with a coach staying, right, and putting his mark on the program. This is the type of play we're going to play. This is the type of physicality, the speed, whatever. And I feel like a program like Elysian Fields will really benefit on some just consistency and getting some tenure out of a coach. It's kind of like, how the college programs are, right? They just keep turning over. Nothing can really get established. And I think if Elysian Fields is able to do that and hang on to a coach and the coach stay and gets everybody buying in, they could be good really fast again.
They're one of the programs that I always have to go, man, they have not won a state championship.
Yeah, right. They've been close.
Been there.
Chris Brown.
Yeah.
Against Salina a couple times.
Yeah, the first one was a lot closer. The second one, I think, if I remember correctly, and I could have that flipped, and somebody will let us know. And then they had the unfortunate of playing Canadian right when Canadian was starting to be that, that's when they had that first set of twins, and they were just they were throwing up Texas Tech numbers. But I think you're right. When you're at that level and you bring up football or any sport, but especially like college, when you look at a team that's always having to find a new coach because they're really good, but they stay really good. That program has learned how to hire a coach. Yeah. And sometimes that's what you got to learn, how to hire a coach, knowing, hey, we're going to get this new guy in. He's going to be awesome, might lead us to state, but we also are a 2A program that's not really going to grow. So we're always going to be a stepping stone, accept that and do better at it.
Right.
Speaking of East Texas, now this is one that it hit 2A all the way up to 4A. In one of the not really surprising if you knew him and kind of knew behind the scenes, but surprising to everybody, Clay Baker resigns from Henderson to go back to Price Carlisle. Of course, that is where he basically got Price Carlisle from always being a 7-4 team to actually pushing for the region. They were 43-17 his time there. He left to go to Henderson 2 years ago. Really solid first season that got destroyed by injuries. Then he, pulled off the upset of Kilgore and then still didn't make the playoffs.
Yeah.
I think he just saw the writing on the wall. And this is not a knock on him. I think maybe I think Price Carlisle is perfect for him. And I think he realized that.
Yeah. And Meeks comes in, right? From center. So if anything, Henderson's going to be putting up some points over the next few years, right?
As I say, this is the part I do love about coaching moves as they start to puzzle together.
Yep.
Henderson, of course, hires Ricky Joe Meeks, who had a basketball offense, but the defense struggled. But then last year,
Defense is really good, or pretty good last year, right?
Yeah, I mean, for them, they weren't, world beaters, but they were keeping
Much improved.
Yeah, and they were keeping their offense that was very young because it was the year before that they had so many studs. We watched them. They gave some great teams some trouble. They just could never stop them. But so he does that, and I think of course, his dad led Henderson to their state title in 2010. The late great Dickie Meeks. I think this is as home run of a hire as you could get.
Let's hope so. I'd really like to see Henderson get back on the map out there in that part of East Texas. Great fans out there, love seeing a game in Henderson, and where they're ultra competitive. It's just one heck of an atmosphere, and I love it out there.
There is, we can talk about Kilgore, Carthage, and Carthage, blah, blah, blah. But to me, Henderson and Carthage, when those two teams are good, even when they're not good, it's still going to be a Wally knocker. But when they're both good, I mean, that is like playoff football in week 4.
Wally.
I meant to bring this up earlier, but I do.
That's just going on my definition lookup after.
I want to explain that one. I want to tip a glass to the late, great Jerry Bennett, head coach of Jefferson. That was one of his sayings. He is a man that you and I, back in 2013, I think it was, surprised my daughter who was at Linden Kildare. You and I went out there, and I called him. He said, "Jack, come on." And me and you would have never knew he had a game that night.
Yeah.
He gave us all the time. We went to the point where you and I were like, okay, hey, I think I just heard the official, coach. And we had a great time. He was a great dude. And I'm actually going to put something together this offseason. I'm talking to Jefferson players of that time. Mm-hmm. I've always told you this when we did our best since 1980 3A. I fought for them, and I know part of it's because hero worship and all. But I contend that 86 Jefferson is one of the best 3A state championships in the history of the game. It's just
you won't find many faster teams, right? If you go back and look on YouTube.
All right, so now let's continue back with ours. I wanted to jump up to Brownwood. 4A Division I. This one was a little shocking. This was one of those, it felt like
hometown boy, man.
Hometown boy. This was, let me see, it was his 7 seasons. And he would basically, he came in when the program was on a
Yeah.
I think this is, and I'm not knocking the whole community or anything like that, but this is outside looking in. I think this is one of those where this program thinks they're further ahead than maybe they were this year.
Well,
and you and I talked about,
what was it, 2 years ago? They're an injured running back from being a real threat.
Yes, they were,
and they were still a threat without him. But man, I think they could have just went so much further with that healthy running.
They had a quarterback that could do everything, but he didn't have a running game, and he had wide receivers that were solid but inconsistent.
Yeah.
But anyway, they bring in Gerald Brixey, the KDOC. We'll see.
Mm-hmm.
That just was one of those that just felt weird. You talked about center. They hired Nick Brown. Mm-hmm. He was the Aubrey offensive coordinator. I think this is a group I think center is doing like what Texas Tech did for a while. They're leaning into the offensive side of what they do. And I think bringing in an Aubrey offensive coordinator is going to be Aubrey's offense is not only really talented, but they have a really sound scheme-wise. They don't make a lot of stupid mistakes.
Offensively, they've been great the last, 5-6 years, right?
I think this is one of those that where both Center and Henderson are going to be happy. Kind of like we were talking about. And we'll go ahead and we'll flip down into the other part of the Jamie Dixon. Edna getting I don't get okay. Jimmy Mitchell is a unique character. Yeah. We all know this, but Jimmy Mitchell knows how to win. And if Edna really, and I like who they hired in Jamie Dixon again, who came from Blanco. I love him. I think he's going to do well here. But if they think the reason that Edna didn't finally break through is because of Jimmy Mitchell's coaching, then they just don't understand the region that they're in against who they have to play in the state semifinals.
Yeah, well, a lot of Franklins in their way, right?
Exactly. It's got nothing to do with Jimmy Mitchell could have called the perfect game, but when it's Franklin 2nd and 2 all game, what are you going to do?
Right. Yeah.
But anyway, they do make a good hire. Sometimes bad decisions can still make a good hire, and I do think that they made a good hire with Jamie Dixon.
Yeah.
We talked about it. Gladewater, longtime assistant AD Jermaine Lewis I've never heard of him. I mean, obviously he's been in coaching, but this is his first head coaching job. Again, Johnny Lever left, stepping down after 5 seasons to take a job outside of education. I also think it was Gladewater turned out. It felt like 2019 when Mount Vernon beat them. It felt like that ended an era where Gladewater for 7 years had been really, really good. And that's kind of how it works for Gladewater. They're kind of 7 years on, 6 years off. And I think Johnny
been a little off lately, right?
Yeah, and I think
far removed from that Gilmer loss in the playoffs where Gilmer made the stunning comeback. For 2 years in a row, Gladewater was as good as anybody, could have beaten anybody. Just got some breaks go against them the last those 2 years, right? And it feels like that we're so far removed from that right now.
I know that Pottsboro loss. That's the one I thought. As great as Dalen Mack was, that team got hot because nobody could stop Mack in the playoffs.
Yeah,
I love the fact he had like 200 yards going into the playoffs his junior year and ended up with like 1,300 yards rushing because they just ran him 100 times.
Especially in the playoffs.
He got like 1,200 yards in the playoffs alone.
Right, yeah.
But the team that lost to Pottsboro in 2021 or whatever it was, whatever the next year's when they lose to Mount Vernon, that team I thought could win state. I legitimately that. And again, Gladewater's is like Elysian Fields, another East Texas team. You go, wow, they've never won state, and they haven't even really been to state. It's always the state semifinals or the region finals that gets them.
Yeah. And again, though, they're in that geographically challenged area of the region as well, though, man. You get out of by district, man, you swing either way, and you've got some heavy hitters you're going up against in area and regional rounds.
Well, yeah, especially when you consider there used to be a time when you were Gladewater and Gilmer, you were swinging and hitting the DISD schools in round 3, and that was walkovers. To now you're hitting, I'm not saying Gunter, but that Gunter and Brock's before Brock moved up. Those teams, it's not you don't have that third round walk that these teams used to have. Grossbeck, Jerry Bomer retires.
What? How many years?
40 years.
40 years.
262 wins, 172 losses, 3 ties. And I always forget he led Grossbeck to that 1991 improbable state championship. Jerry Bomar is one of those that's just a coaching lifer. Yeah. And every time I had any dealings with him, he was super nice, just a really good guy. And I just always have loved the coach. I'm not saying he didn't want to win state, but it was obvious he was just enjoying coaching and being a mentor to these teams. And I love that Grossbeck had him twice, and they were perfectly happy as long as they were playoff competitive, and they were pretty playoff competitive his whole time. Yeah,
and his son Rhett Bomar was considered one of the best quarterbacks to come out of high school into college with OU. Right, didn't do a whole lot. There, but I believe Rhett's in coaching as well, I think. Right?
Yeah, I think so. Iowa Park, dude. I will 100% admit this. I don't understand why Iowa Park, especially after dropping into 3A Division I, has not just laid waste to everybody, at least in that region. As Michael Swenson, it felt like a good hire. I don't want to say it was a bad hire, but it felt like it just never quite worked out like everybody thought it would. He left to take an assistant AD role in Weatherford. Wayland Baptist, offensive coordinator, and high school football head coach Brian Wood was hired on April 1st. I don't know if it's going to help, but I still contend Iowa Park is a team that, I don't want to say a dynasty's there, but they could be one of the region threats year in and year out.
Yeah, kind of expect them to be, but they really haven't. Even when they were pretty tough back in the years, and they would, they pressed Brock pretty good, right? And but they never really did much with those teams into the playoffs, deep playoffs runs or anything. So definitely something lacking there in Iowa Park. And hopefully this guy can get it turned around.
All right, Little River Academy. Mark Mullins leaves. He was 12-12 there. It was simple. 2 years ago, they had a great offense, had a great running back. They were really, really good. They were just in a really tough division or district.
They were loaded offensively, weren't they?
They were loaded. They gave Franklin, Coach Fannin, when we were talking, has always said that was the one game or team that he hated to play against
Kind of
because
scared him a little bit. Yeah.
they were good enough to beat Franklin, but Franklin just beat them. And then last year, that running back transferred, the quarterback graduated, and they fell to 2-9, but they were still really, really competitive. But he stepped down. And Tycoon, Lampasas assistant coach. This is a good hire because Little River Academy over the last few years have had some really good quarterbacks. That's kind of what made their hay.
Yeah.
And Lampasas, man, Tycoon's part of that offensive staff that just has pushed. We all remember Ace Whitehead, but the guy that they have coming back this year, who was good last year, they're almost where they were a couple years ago.
Yeah, he's one of the leading passers, right, in all of 4A. Coming into last year, right?
Yep.
I believe like one of the top, 5 returning starters yardage wise. So yeah.
And he's getting all the recruit pub and everything like that. So it's going to be interesting. Paradise as Joe Cock. He retired. I didn't realize he had coached in Wisconsin forever. He was actually, and I get this information from Matt Stepp. He was a Wisconsin High School Football Coaches Hall of Fame guy already.
Wow.
He kind of put Paradise on the map the last few years, had a really great 3-year special run, 57-26. They had their first state semifinal appearance in 2024. I think that was also the year that first time they went past the second round. They promoted his son, Tommy, who was the defensive coordinator. I think this is a really good hire. I think Paradise is in a spot in that region now that Brock is gone and Gunter still isn't up yet. And Gunter still might not be up the next one. I know everybody thinks that every area in Dallas-Fort Worth is exploding, and it is, but it hasn't fully got to everywhere. Paradise could rule this 3A Division I, Region 1.
Yeah, especially with the speed and the overall team speed they've shown with the last 2 or 3 years, and how good, solid the defense has been. Yeah, I think this would be great.
Now, in saying that, there's another 3A Division I team who I felt disappointed last year when they dropped down from 4A Division II with a very young team and a freshman or a sophomore quarterback. Sweetwater, they did kind of rally late to go 6-5, but they never could. They just never quite got going.
Yeah.
And Russell Lucas, he retires. Of course, he won state with Hamlin back in 2019. He's one of those guys that coached out there and all over the area and stuff. Right. And so he retired, and they brought in offensive coordinator, and also he was a high school head coach, Brian Hodnett. I think that's a smart move because you still have a young quarterback who's a junior this year. You still got 2 years with him, and you still have a really
started since a freshman year, right?
Yeah, since a freshman year against in 4A Division II, right. And so they still have a young team. So I think this is a really good hire to kind of hire within. But all right, want to remind everybody that we're almost fully back. We're not quite back. We will be back. We kind of start here in the next couple of weeks looking at our schedules and stuff. But once we start, we will try to go weekly. And again, we'll do what you call dark horse, toughest region, toughest district.
Yeah.
And we'll maybe mix in another show, and then of course we'll also do the Big R's preview show. We'll have more details about that here coming up soon as we talk about all that. But other than that, man, I mean, we're
all right. Good deal. I'm excited, man. It's gonna be a fun year.
Always is, my friend.